That's quite a bell. And good morning. My name is Rich Stockton, and every week we start our services with something called Living Our Values Every Day. It's a chance for people to learn about some of the social justice activities that are happening around the congregation. And today I'd like to invite Sally Conley and Carol Wade to come up and talk about the sadly appropriate topic, preventing gun violence.
Good morning. I'm Sally.
I'm Carol. As co-chairs of your Preventing Gun Violence Task Force, we are horrified by the mass shooting in Buffalo yesterday by a white supremacist, as well as the recent tragic shooting of a young man in Hamden. It is unfortunately all too common, yet each death diminishes families and our communities. In response to violence like this, the task force was founded and stems from our committed belief in the 8 principles of Unitarian Universalism. Recently, the CDC announced that U.S. gun homicides reached the highest level in 25 years during the COVID pandemic. And this remains true today as homicides increased 35% between 2019 and 2020. In 2020, over 45,000 people were killed by gun violence. Since gun violence impacts communities of color and areas of poverty more directly, we work to reduce the impact of gun violence by participating in community events, other state and national groups, and we lobby both state and national legislators for preventative laws. We also work with the Urban Resource Initiative in caring for the New Haven Botanical Garden of Healing, dedicated to victims of gun violence. This is a spiritual and healing place in New Haven to reflect on life and to honor those who have died.
We do have hope that we can bring an end to this horrific epidemic of gun violence. With the help of many task force members and many of you who advocated, petitioned, made calls, demonstrated, and lobbied at the state capitol, now included in the Connecticut General Assembly's budget and signed by Governor Lamont, is an unprecedented appropriation of nearly $6 million to fund community gun violence prevention, intervention, and aftercare programs. Yeah. This investment to address the public health crisis of gun violence will establish an Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the Department of Public Health and will fund proven outreach efforts to stem gun violence. It brings us hope, but there is still much to be done. We urge you to attend the rally on June 2nd at 6 p.m. on the New Haven Green to honor the victims of gun violence and raise awareness of this other epidemic. To find out more about the work of your task force, community activities, and what you can do to decrease gun violence, please pick up our handouts as you leave the sanctuary. And we welcome you to attend our next meeting next Sunday at 9 a.m. here. Thank you very much.
Well, as I said before, I am Rich Stockton, a member of the worship committee and your worship associate for today. You can refer to me with the pronouns he and him. Our minister, Reverend Linda Susan, took this Sunday off from worship so that she could focus on their spiritual direction conference this week. But Reverend Linda Susan will take part in today's workshop, which I'll mention in a minute. Participating in the service today will be Jesse Greist, our Director of Lifetime Religious Education, and our music directors, Erica Schroth and Bill Braun. And we have a musical guest this morning, Yara Matyakubova, who's the violinist with the Music Haven Quartet. Welcome. And we have a guest speaker today, Beth Robbins Roth. Welcome, Beth. Beth is a bilingual family nurse practitioner and somatic experiencing trauma healing practitioner. She has been teaching Buddhism and meditation at USNH since January of 2000. That's how many of you know her. She does consulting and staff development for medical providers, mental health clinicians, substance abuse counselors, and other professionals and organizations around Connecticut. If you're joining us for the first time, we're so glad you chose to spend this time with us. We are a diverse, multi-generational faith community that inspires lives of compassion and generosity, nurtures spiritual growth, cultivates transformative connections, and creates a more just world. We proclaim that all individuals and communities have the right to self-determination, safety, and the resources that are necessary for health and sustainability. In addition to our live stream version of the service, we're able to meet in person, but for everyone's safety, we must keep our high-quality masks on when not at the podium. And please do remember to bring your mask from home every week. We're happy to supply one if you don't have one or if you forget, but you do save USNH money by bringing your own mask. And the other request I have on behalf of your neighbor is to please silence your electronic devices. For newcomers here in person, please stop by the welcome table after the service, or you can contact us by email at membership@usnh.org. Or you can go to our website, usnh.org, to find out more about us. Now, there's an announcement to remind you to attend the Protecting Your Family, Planning Your Legacy, a workshop sponsored by the Endowment and Legacy Committee, today at 11:45 in the sanctuary. Reverend Linda Susan will discuss the spiritual aspects of estate planning. Attorney Michael Brandt, a probate court judge, will discuss the essential elements of an estate plan. And Mary Beth Congdon, Yale University Planning and Giving Director, will explain gift planning to perpetuate your values and priorities. Now, please look in our newsletter. There are other things. There's a Tai Chi class today. There's an LBGTQ meeting. And this is the last day for the diaper drive, so there's more information in the newsletter. Now, the call to worship this morning is taken from Reverend Gretchen Haley. Come in, all who long to know how to love this world, how to keep eyes open, hands unclenched, arms wide, breathing deeply in and out. This is a time to practice because there is still so much good and beauty and joy, but it can be hard to keep telling this tale with all the news and the wind and the rain and the trembling earth. Come in, all who teeter on this edge of cynicism, brokenhearted and trying still to remember laughter and kindness and the chance to be alive. In these days when so much is at stake, in this place we remind each other why we persist, giving each other courage to take this path that is not always easy, to keep practicing this love that cannot, will not let us go, and still calls us on. Come, let us worship together. We light our chalice as a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, and these are the words of Reverend Dr. David Breeden. We join together, bringing both our shadow and our light. We join together, opening our minds and our hearts. We join together, embracing, celebrating, sharing the beauty of each, the beauty of self, the beauty of the earth, and the beauty of all. Covenant lies at the center of how Unitarian Universalists gather in community. We are united not by a particular set of beliefs, but by the promises we make about how we will be together, how we will treat each other, and how we will seek to mend relationships when we fall short of our aspirations. Each week, we recite together a brief version of our covenant. I encourage you to read the full covenant on our website. While the following words express our intentions in writing, our true covenant lives and breathes in our actions. Please join me now in reciting these words in your order of service. We covenant together to create and nurture a culture of respect and kindness, and to engage in the spiritual and everyday practice of loving more generously. To this end, we will strive to be open, value differences, listen deeply, use kind language, speak our truths, work with conflict, seek humor and joy.
Good morning. Please rise in body or in spirit as we sing hymn number 183 in the gray hymnal, The Wind of Change Forever Blown.
It was the day after the annual festival of Holi that Sharmila received the news that her Mataji had died. Mataji had lived a full and wonderful life, and Sharmila had a difficult decision to make. Should she stay in the city and try to make arrangements for the family farm, or should she try to go out and give it a try being a farmer? Well, Sharmila talked about it with her daughter, Ajna, and they decided to go out and give the farming life a try. So they packed up their things and they went out to the family farm. Sharmila spoke those wonderful words we've all heard so many times before, "How hard can it be?" She got out to the family farm, and there were a couple of big, mature mango trees filled with mangoes that were just a few days from ripe. There was a nice patch of tomatoes and other vegetables out there, already planted, already growing. And there was a beautiful farmhouse and a shed full of all the tools you could possibly want. Again, Sharmila said, "How hard can this be?" Until the next morning, she woke up to the pitter-patter of monkey paws on the rooftop. And she went outside and saw an entire troop of bandar, monkeys, out in the mango trees eating every single mango in sight. "Well, there goes today's harvest," she said. And she watched helplessly as the monkeys stared her directly in the eye, eating every single mango in sight. She said, "At least I still have my patch of vegetables." Well, the next morning, she woke up and went outside and discovered to her horror that the neighbors' horses had gotten out and had gotten into the vegetable patch and had gobbled down all of the vegetables and tromped down everything that was left, leaving nothing but little tiny piles of what we'll call horse apples in their wake. Well, Sharmila and Ajna looked at each other and went, "I think we know now that those were famous last words." They went inside and tried to regroup and figure out what was going on, and they said, "Tomorrow morning we will decide how we're going to move on from here." Well, the next morning they woke up pre-dawn, and there, outside, somehow, inexplicably, the shed with all the tools in it was on fire. This all happened in 2020, by the way. The shed was on fire, and the whole thing burned down to nothing but ashes. Well, that did it. Sharmila and Ajna got up and said, "This farming life is nothing but suffering. We are going to pack up our things and go back to the city." As they were packing up their things, Ajna went out and was sort of picking through the ashes of the burned down shed and found in amongst those ashes a little tin box. Ajna didn't say a word, just picked up that box, tucked it in among their things, and they went back to the city and picked up their life where it was. They started making plans possibly to sell the farm. And a couple of months went by. And one night, Ajna and Sharmila were talking about their experience, and Ajna said, "You know, the last day that we were there, in the ashes of that fire, I found this little tin box. And I never told you about it, and I'm not sure why. But let's open it, see what's in there." So Ajna pulled out that still ashy tin box and opened it up there on the dining room table. And in that tin box was a tiny note. On that note was written a poem. And the poem said this: "Remember, monkeys plant mangoes. Yesterday's feces is tomorrow's fertilizer. Always seek hope in the ashes. They looked at that. They said, "Oh, Mataji, how could you have possibly known?" But they took that note and they said, "Let's go back out and see that farm one last time before we decide to sell it." So they took that note, they folded up, and they took one more trip out to the family farm. And do you know what they found out there? They found, not that, they found hundreds of tiny mango trees growing from the seeds that the monkeys had spread all around on the ground. They found that the neighbor who owned the horses had felt so bad about what the horses did that the neighbor had taken all of that horse stuff, horse apples, and built it into a beautiful compost pile and replanted the entire garden. And the plants were bigger and better at this time because of that compost that had been composting for the last couple of months. And sure enough, people from around the town had heard about the fire, and they had come together and rebuilt the shed and stocked it with all the tools that they needed. And Sharmila and Ajna decided, maybe we'll give it one more try. And they stayed, and within a few years, they had some mango trees that were growing and had enough mangoes that they could provide mangoes for the monkeys and for the market. They had all the tomatoes and all the carrots and all of the potatoes that they could raise, and there was enough there for the market. They even brought a few carrots over for the neighbors' horses. And I'll tell you what, that shed now has a little framed poem on the front of it. And that poem says, "Monkeys plant mangoes, yesterday's feces is tomorrow's fertilizer, and always look through the ashes for hope." Any children that are here in the room can now come out to their classes with me and enjoy the rest of your service.
I now invite you to join me in holding in our hearts the joy and sorrow of those in our community, closing your eyes and going inward if you're comfortable doing so. Some of our joys shine more brightly as others reflect our delight, and some of our burdens are made lighter as others help us carry them. Al Bosch asks that you keep his grandson, Tyler Bosch-Bird, in your thoughts. Tyler, age 11, has had an unidentified respiratory infection for the past 6 weeks. He's been tested, but no answer has been found. He's scheduled to be seen by an infectious disease specialist on May 18th. The family attends Heritage Universalist Unitarian Church in Newton, Ohio. And we all know the sorrows. We keep the people in Buffalo in our hearts, victims and families from that mass shooting. And we continue to hold the people of Ukraine in our hearts. May peace come soon. And then there is a joy, and several of you pointed this out, but Winfried Rembert has posthumously won the Pulitzer Prize for his book, Chasing Me to My Grave. Many of us, UUs, were involved in launching his artistic career. I know we have his artwork in our library. We're so thrilled for Patsy, his wife, and his family. And I take these words to end, they're from Wayne Muller in his book, How Then Shall We Live? Love and sadness are blended together in the waters of our life, and we must drink them together, just as they are. Neither cancels out the other. Love, added to the sadness, makes our grief bittersweet. Sadness injected into our love creates a love that burns the heart. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Jim Peters. I'm Rich's colleague on the worship committee, and he invited me to introduce the offering this morning. So yesterday morning, my wife and I went on a bird walk in Brooksvale Park. It started and ended near Mount Sanford Road at the backyard of the couple leading the walk. Amidst their many feeders, they had put out mealworms for the bluebirds, and sure enough, within seconds, both a male and female bluebird swooped in, gathered some, and flew off to a nearby tree to feed their recently born chicks. We couldn't see the babies, which was probably smart on the bluebird's part, but we knew what was happening. And as I watched this process repeat several times, it struck me that this is how living systems survive, whether it's bluebirds and mealworms, or mangoes and monkeys, or horses and vegetables. Everything needs to be fed, and they need feeders to make it happen. Here at USNH, we are a living community too, with ongoing real needs. Every day when I read the news, I'm reminded again that the work we are trying to do here, the values we are trying to live out, are desperately needed in our nation and our world. So I ask you to please support the ongoing work of this community, either by seeing one of the ushers after the service who will be holding collection plates, by visiting usnh.org and clicking on the donate button on the homepage, or by sending a check to 700 Hartford Turnpike, Hamden, Connecticut 06517. Whenever and however it arrives, please know your support is gratefully received. It is how this living system survives.
This reading is from Book of Joy by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama. Discovering more joy does not, I'm sorry to say, the Archbishop added, save us from the inevitability of hardship and heartbreak. In fact, we may cry more easily, but we will laugh more easily, too. Perhaps we are just more alive. Yet, as we discover more joy, we can face suffering in a way that ennobles rather than embitters. We have hardship without becoming hard. We have heartbreak without being broken.
Not only can I breathe now, but my glasses will defog. Is this okay, the angle of them? Okay. Good morning to everyone here in the sanctuary and to everyone streaming the service at home. I want to thank the USNH congregation for the opportunity to be with you this morning and thank the worship committee for the care and planning and assistance with today's service. I will begin with a dedication, sometimes called a dedication of merit or a dedication for the greater good. May the blessings and benefits of our time together here this morning be offered to all of life for the sake of justice, freedom, health, and peace. So I'm speaking today about joy in the midst of suffering. The topic seems especially important now as the COVID pandemic continues, along with the accompanying economic, social, and political upheaval here in the United States and around the world. I believe we all have moments when it feels impossible to be joyful, and moments when it may be difficult to imagine feeling joy, or to even come up with a rationale for considering joy at a time when our nation, our world, and our planetary home are experiencing such extraordinary pain and suffering. French novelist and philosopher André Gide wrote, "Know that joy is rarer, more difficult, and more beautiful than sadness. Once you make this all-important discovery, you must embrace joy as a moral obligation." This quote sounds powerful to me, but I also realize that considering joy to be a moral obligation feels very grim and demanding. And even when it seems possible to welcome joy, another consideration is how do we turn towards joy, experience joy, embody joy, and offer our joy to others and to the world when joy doesn't seem to be showing up for us. I was very moved to read Barbara Kingsolver's guidance about this very question. In her novel, High Tide in Tucson, she wrote, "In my own worst seasons, I've come back from the colorless world of despair by forcing myself to look hard for a long time at a single glorious thing, a flame of red geranium outside my bedroom window, and then another, my daughter in a yellow dress, and another, the perfect outline of a full dark sphere behind the crescent moon, until I learned to be in love with my life again, like a stroke victim retraining new parts of the brain to grasp lost skills. I have taught myself joy over and over again." In the Buddhist tradition, joy is one of 4 Brahmaviharas, or divine states, along with loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity. In the Pali language, this joy is called mudita, translated into English as sympathetic joy, or altruistic joy, or sometimes shared joy. It is defined as the ability to feel happy and to rejoice when others are happy. The Dalai Lama says that given the number of people on the planet, the ability to experience mudita, or sympathetic joy, can increase one's own happiness by nearly 8 billion. People laugh sometimes when they hear this, but if you think about it for a moment, it's absolutely true. I've experimented with how this works. In a moment when I'm feeling pretty miserable, if I can muster the wherewithal to remember that there are other beings experiencing joy at the same moment, I am uplifted. If I can bring to mind a recent experience where I noticed someone else feeling joyful, I can feel that joy in myself and my own mood shifts. Thich Nhat Hanh said, defining mudita as sympathetic joy is too limited, simply because it discriminates between self and other. He wrote, a deeper definition of mudita is a joy that is filled with peace and contentment. We rejoice when we see others happy, and we rejoice in our own well-being as well. How can we feel joy for another person when we do not feel joy for ourselves? Joy is for everyone. And Wayne Muller echoes this expansive quality of joy when he says, joy marvels at the beauty of all things, celebrates life, and rejoices in the well-being of all. Although the words happiness and joy are often used interchangeably, Buddhist teachings name different kinds of happiness and joy. One is called ordinary happiness. This is the happiness we feel when we have pleasurable experiences. We get what we want. We avoid what we don't want. We accumulate experiences, possessions, and relationships that we like. The Buddha acknowledged that this happiness is indeed pleasurable. It's also fine and good as long as we are aware of what it is and know that it's not genuine happiness, which is defined very simply as inner peace. Joy is more like genuine happiness, an inner state not dependent on external circumstances. Joy, like genuine happiness, is said to be bigger, deeper, and more enduring than ordinary happiness. This type of joy is sometimes called shining contentment or spiritual radiance because it comes from deep within and is infused with love and benevolence towards others. Attempting to put into words an embodied experience of joy can be challenging and incomplete. David White, in his poem, The Winter of Listening, invites us to locate joy in the body. He writes, what is precious inside us does not care to be known by the mind in ways that diminish its presence. Inside everyone is a great shout of joy waiting to be born. It is said that when we live in the present, we can more easily tap into this quality of joy. Sometimes it arises for no apparent reason, and children often live close to this joy. Maurice Sendak, author of Where the Wild Things Are and many other famous children's books, told the story of a boy who wrote to him. He sent me a charming card with a drawing. I loved it. I answer all my children's letters, sometimes very hastily, but this one I lingered over. I sent him a postcard, and I drew a picture of a wild thing on it. I wrote, "Dear Jim, I loved your card." Then I got a letter back from his mother. She wrote, "Jim loved your card so much he ate it." That, to me, was one of the highest compliments I ever received. The ability to feel one's own joy and to rejoice in another's joy is strengthened by recognition of our interconnection. The COVID pandemic has certainly clarified the interconnection of people all around the world, as well as the interconnection of our species with other species, and the interconnection of all living beings, the natural world, and our planet. International environmental and social justice activist Joanna Macy describes this interconnection. She says, the way we define and delimit the self is arbitrary. We can place it between our ears and have it looking out from our eyes, or we can widen it to include the air we breathe, or at other moments we can cast its boundaries farther to include the oxygen-giving trees and plankton, our external lungs, and beyond them to the web of life in which we are sustained. This interdependence or interconnection, or what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing, is of course not an exclusive Buddhist perspective. Martin Luther King, imprisoned in 1963 in Birmingham, Alabama, for his participation in a nonviolent demonstration against racial segregation, wrote in his famous letter from a Birmingham jail, "It really boils down to this: all life is interrelated. All people are part of an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny." A teaching story from the Jewish tradition speaks to our profound interconnection. A Hasidic rabbi asks his pupils how they could tell when the night had ended and the day begun, for daybreak is the time for certain holy prayers. "Is it," proposed one student, "when you can see an animal in the distance and tell whether it is a sheep or a dog?" "No," answered the rabbi. Another student asked, "Is it when you can clearly see the lines in the palm of your own hand?" "No," answered the rabbi. "Is it," asked another student, "when you can look at a tree in the distance and tell if it is a fig tree or a pear tree?" "No," answered the rabbi. "Then tell us, what is it?" the pupils demanded. The rabbi explained, "It is when you can look on the face of any man or woman and see that they are your brother or your sister, for until that time you are living in darkness." Albert Einstein, known for his scientific brilliance and not religious leadership, expressed interconnection in this way. He said, "A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few people nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty." Historians say that Einstein penned this statement in a letter consoling a friend whose young son had recently died of polio. So here we again find that interconnection to other beings, nature, and our planet is a link to the experience of joy and to the possibility of calling upon joy to soothe us in our sorrow. The Buddha recognized joy and sorrow as universal human experiences. He taught that every human life will have 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. Personally, I appreciate that he names suffering as inherent to the human condition and not an aberration, a punishment, or a sign that something has gone wrong. I've always wondered, though, about the numbers 10,000 and 10,000, and about how we don't get to decide what our sufferings will be, how big or small they will be, when they will befall us, or how we will recover from them. If we are fortunate, we learn all this as we go along, with the love and support of our networks of interconnection with others. The Buddha often taught by asking questions of his students. One famous teaching question the Buddha asked was, which is greater, the amount of water in all the great oceans of the world, or the amount of water in the tears that every human being will shed in their lifetime? We are encouraged to reflect, even when our tears could fill oceans, that joy is available to us as well. Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa spoke of this relationship between joy and sorrow in the quote that Richard shared with us in the reading a few minutes ago. I want to emphasize the words from this quote that have been the most instructive for me, and also that I trust the author of these words, Desmond Tutu, as an authority on joy and suffering, as he was tasked by Nelson Mandela with uniting South Africa after the end of apartheid. Archbishop Tutu writes, as we discover more joy, we can face suffering in a way that ennobles rather than embitters. We have hardship without becoming hard. We have heartbreak without being broken. What Archbishop Tutu so beautifully describes has been documented by recent decades of research in neuroscience. Joy builds resilience in the human nervous system. Although it's important to feel joy, we know it's not always easy due to what may be happening inside of us and around us. The Buddha identified numerous obstacles to joy. These are powerful states of mind and heart that get in the way of appreciating others' happiness and of experiencing joy ourselves. These obstacles include judgment, comparison, demeaning, and selfishness. These are states of mind and heart we all know. They are responsible for much of the suffering that human beings experience, for much of the cruelty that human beings cause one another, and for much of the harm and destruction that human beings inflict on animals, plants, nature, and our planet. The Buddhist teachings on mudita also name human qualities that support and strengthen our own joy and the joy we can feel for others' happiness. These qualities are called the allies of mudita. They include gratitude, loving kindness, and compassion. And we also know these qualities personally. There is a traditional Buddhist practice called sharing merit that supports the development of one's own joy and of sympathetic joy. Merit is the usual English translation of the Pali word puna, which literally means virtue. Meritorious actions are said to hold the key to all kinds of happiness, both temporary, worldly happiness and the shining contentment or spiritual radiance associated with deeper states of joy. This concept of merit recognizes that all actions have results, and when an individual acts in a skillful or virtuous way, that action brings virtuous results. We cannot always know the full extent of the results, and the results may ripple out and reverberate in the world over time in ways we cannot imagine or understand. And because of interdependence, the meritorious actions of any one person are believed to benefit all of humanity throughout endless time. In this light, we are encouraged to value every virtuous action, no matter how small it may seem or how localized in time and place, and see it as a vital part of a larger whole that affects everyone for all time. This teaching about merit includes the belief that the good results of the virtuous actions of all people who have ever lived and died live on in the world today. We increase merit when we act in ways that honor our own self-worth as well as the dignity and worth of others. Merit grows through thoughts, speech, and actions of goodness. The traditional wording for the dedication of merit says, "May the merit of this action be shared by all beings everywhere, so that they may come to the end of suffering." The dedication that I opened my talk with today is a variation that I offer in all my teaching and professional trainings. May the benefits and blessings of our time together here today be offered to all of life for the sake of justice, freedom, health, and peace. The practice of merit helps us to rejoice in our own skillful actions and allows us to identify with the strengths and virtues of others. This has vast implications in our work for social justice and for the survival of our planet. Joanna Macy explains that considering the overwhelming problems facing the world today, an understanding of merit is crucial. She writes, "Sharing merit is very important for a sense of adequacy and resilience because we face a time of great challenge that demands of us more commitment, endurance, and courage than we can dredge up out of our individual supply. We can learn to draw on the other neurons in the neural net and view them in a grateful and celebratory fashion." So I'm going to move right now into a short guided meditation that goes with these words and ideas. It's more like a visualization, which involves our imagination. So I brought my trustee support for imagination. I'm going to share it with you. It is a magic wand. And the reason why I have a magic wand when we work with the imagination is to remind us that imagination is so magic that the word magic, except for its last letter, is actually part of the word imagination. So if you think a magic wand might help your imagination here as we do this visualization, feel free to tap into it. If this is silly and ridiculous, pretend I never showed this to you. So this is a guided visualization that draws on the work of Joanna Macy around the world in helping to build community and networks for social and environmental justice. To begin, I invite you just to take a nice breath and to feel both the inhalation and the exhalation. And if you like, stretch your arms a little bit, just help the energy in your body to know that it can move if it likes. You show that. And then sitting comfortably, and you choose to have your eyes open or closed, whichever you like. And begin to gently invite into your awareness the fellow beings with whom you share this planet time. All the other people. In this town, in this country, and around the world. Imagine the multitudes in your mind's eye. Now let your awareness open wider to encompass all beings who have ever lived. People of all races and religions, all sizes and shapes, young and old, who have ever lived. People of all walks of life, rich and poor, royalty and beggars, saints and sinners. Seeing the vast vistas of these fellow beings stretching into the distance like successive mountain ranges. And then consider the fact that in each and every of these innumerable lives, some acts of merit were performed. In every single life, there were gestures of generosity, gifts of love, acts of virtue and self-sacrifice. On the battlefield and in the workplace, in a hospital, in a school, or at home. From these beings in their endless multitudes arose actions of courage, kindness, teaching, and healing. Let yourself begin to imagine these immeasurable acts of merit. Imagine you could sweep together all these many, many acts of merit, sweep them into a pile in front of you. Use your arms and your hands. Pile them up. Pile them higher into a huge heap and view it, look at it with joy and gratitude. And begin to pat this heap with your hands. Pat it into a great big ball. This is the great ball of merit. Hold it in your arms. Rejoice in it, knowing that no act of goodness is ever lost. All these acts of merit remain ever and always a resource for us. A means for the transformation of life. So now, with joy and celebration, turn that great ball. Turn it over. Turn it over again and again and again into the healing of our world. So I will hold silence with you for 1 minute, and then I will ring the bell. Thank you for your presence and your attention.
Please rise in body or in spirit as we sing hymn 1060 in the Teal hymnal. As we sing of hope and joy, we'll do the first two verses. Actually, while Bill plays, I think verse 1 and 4 are better. Verse 1 and 4. As we sing of hope and joy today, some know the anguish and despair. How can we lift our voices in this way, while some have pain and misery to spare? Sing of joy while hammering each nail. Sing of hope while pulling every weed. So shall we sing together and prevail. May every alleluia bear us seed.
Please join me in reciting the words in your order of service for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. These words of benediction: may all sentient beings be well and enjoy the root of happiness, free from suffering and the root of suffering. May they not be separated from the joy beyond sorrow. May they dwell in spacious equanimity, free from craving, fear, and ignorance. Amen, and may it be so.